All right, the first thing we need to talk about is to go back to this term, absolute value. Absolute value basically means, if you boil it all down, it means the distance a number is from 0 on a number line. So if I have a number line, and I'm looking at this point 2 on the number line, we're wanting to know how far is 2 from 0, how many units. So we write that using what are called absolute value bars, and we put the number inside. This means how far is 2 from 0 on the number line? Well, it is 2 units. If we look at the point -2, it is also 2 units away from 0 on the number line. So the absolute value of -2 is also 2 units. Because another way of looking at absolute value is its length. That's all absolute value is, the length. How long is the piece? So if I have a piece of wood that's from here to here, it's 2 units long. From here to here is 2 units long, because length is always positive. Length is always positive. There is no such thing as -6 inches. Doesn't exist. Length is always positive. Now, the two things that they pointed out that you've got to be careful of is if there is a negative outside the absolute value bar. Well, you might say, well, Mr. Bostock, that looks like not. And it does look like not. But it's not. And it's because of the fact that absolute value means distance. And so if we calculate this part of the problem first, we get +4, because it's asking how far is -4 from 0 on the number line. Well, it's 4 units, but then the negative on the outside makes the number negative, which is completely different from that, because the parentheses is just a grouping symbol. The parentheses are not an operation that says do something to what's inside those inside the parentheses, anything special. Whereas here, the bars say what is the distance that number is from 0 on the number line. This is just a way to keep us from writing -4. This is not. And not is positive. So this is positive 4. Because what's really happening here, what this really means is negative 1 times negative 4. There's an understood 1 sitting there in front of that negative sign. And we have negative 1 times negative 4, and a negative times a negative gives us a positive. So you've got to be careful with where the negative sign is at. All right, so we're going to use this information and we're going to work the problems on this sheet. So number 1 through 3 have already been done for us. So let's look at number 4. We have absolute value of 2 plus 2. So on these problems, we need to look first of all at what is inside the absolute value bars. What is in there that we have to deal with or take care of? Well, I need to do 2 plus 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. Now that I've cleaned up the inside, I can now take the absolute value of 4 and I get 4. Number 5, we have absolute value of negative 9. There isn't anything on the inside that we need to add or subtract or multiply or whatever. So we are now going to take the absolute value of negative 9 and we get positive 9. But look what happens when we go to number 6. Absolute value of negative 1 plus negative 1. We have to do what's inside the absolute value bars first. So inside the absolute value bars, negative 1 plus negative 1 is negative 2. So I have to clean up or fix or evaluate what's inside those absolute value bars first. And then when I have a single number left inside the absolute value bars, that's when I can take the absolute value. The absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2 because negative 2 is 2 units away from 0. Number 7, we have absolute value of negative 3. Absolute value of negative 3. Well, there's nothing on the inside to clean up or to fix. Nothing in there that needs to be added or subtracted or multiplied or divided. So now we're ready to take the absolute value of negative 3 and we get positive 3. But now let's look and see what happens with number 8. On number 8, we have the absolute value of 0 minus 3. Absolute value of 0 minus 3. So we have to do what's inside the absolute value bars first. What's inside the absolute value bars first. So I need to evaluate and come up with an answer for 0 minus 3. What is 0 minus 3? Okay, we need to be careful. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. Now that everything on the inside is cleaned up, we can take the absolute value of negative 3, and what do we get as our final answer? Good, correct. Positive 3. Positive 3. Number 9 is absolute value of 6 plus -1. So there's a bunch of stuff inside the absolute value bars. We've got to fix that first before we take the absolute value. So I need to clean up 6 plus -1. What is 6 plus -1? Okay, correct. 6 plus -1 is +5. Now we can take the absolute value of +5 and we get 5 as our answer. Let's look at number 10. We have the absolute value of 8 minus 9 inside the absolute value bars. So we need to clean up 8 minus 1 first. What is 8 minus 9? Okay, that's correct. 8 minus 9 is -1. Now we can take the absolute value of -1 and get +1. Okay. Number 11. Number 11 is a decimal, -2.5. Well, it doesn't matter if it's a decimal or a fraction or what, a mixed number or whatever. We're still dealing with a number line. And let's say 0 is here and 1 is here. And we go to -1. And here's -2 and -3 and -4. -2.5 is -1, -2, -2.5 would be right there. We're still asking how far is that from 0? Well, it's 2.5 units. So it doesn't matter if it's a fraction or a decimal, they stay fractions or decimals. Number 12, the absolute value of 0.5. What would be the absolute value of 0.5? Okay, that's correct. It would be 0.5 or 0.5. You don't have to put the 0 in the front. All right. Look at number 14. Absolute value of -1/2. What would be the absolute value of -1/2? So that's right. Absolute value of -1/2 is +1/2. So it doesn't matter if we're dealing with decimals or if we're dealing with fractions. The absolute value is still the distance that number is from 0. Okay, but now look what happens when we get to number 16. Number 16, we have 1 plus 2 minus 10. Whoa. Well, we still have to clean up what's inside the absolute value bars first. All of that has to be added, subtracted, multiplied, divided together first. And so 1 plus 2 minus 10 is how much? +1, +2, and -10. This part becomes +3, and then we have -10, and +3 minus 10 is -7. You have $1, you have $2, that means you got $3, but you owe $10. So since they would take the $3 away from you, you'd owe $7. And then the absolute value of -7 is +7. Look at number 17. Absolute value of 1 minus 1. We have to clean up what's inside first. 1 minus 1 would give us 1 minus 1 would give us, Okay, yes, 0. And the absolute value of 0 is 0. All right, the last one, number 18, is absolute value of -5 plus absolute value, I'm sorry, absolute value of -5 plus -9. So we have to clean up the inside first. -5 plus -9. So we're cleaning up the inside first. -5 plus a -9 is -14, correct. -5, -9 is -14. Now we can take the absolute value and we get +14. Okay. Now I'm going to do one that was not on the sheet. So I want you to, we'll call it number 19. If I have negative absolute value of -4 minus -2. Whoa. We have to deal with the inside first, so everything else is going to stay the same. But I need to do -4 minus -2. What is this? Correct. It is a not not. And a not not means it's positive. So this really is -4 plus 2. And so simplify again or evaluate again. And -4 plus 2 inside the absolute value bars is how much? Ooh, some of y'all aren't thinking. -4, +2. Remember with our chips, we'd have 4 negative chips and 2 positive chips. 2 of them add out or cancel each other out, and we've got 2 negative chips left, -2. Or if you want to think about -4 and +2 is -2. You owe 4, you have 2, then you really only owe 2. Okay. Then we need to take and do this part. The absolute value of -2 is 2, but then we cannot forget the negative on the outside, and it makes our answer -2. Because there's a negative on the outside, this negative on that outside, we have to do this part first and ignore that negative for a minute. And the absolute value of -2 is +2, but we can't forget that there's a negative hanging out outside, and it makes our answer negative. All right, on number 8, we had parentheses -1 plus absolute value of -6 parentheses. So the first thing we've got to do is inside of this absolute value, there's nothing to compute. There's nothing to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So now we can take the absolute value of -6 and we get +6. Now inside the parentheses, we have a -1 and a +6. +6, there's 6 positive chips and 1 negative chip. Those cancel out and we're left with 5 positive chips. Number 9. On number 9, we have 5 times the absolute value of 1 minus 3. So the first thing we've got to do is what's inside the absolute value bars. And 1 minus 3, that's positive 1, minus 3 is negative 2. Then now we've simplified everything inside, so the absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2, and we get 10. Yeah, in just a second. Hold on. Then on number 10, we had absolute value of 8 over absolute value of negative 2. The absolute value of 8 is 8. The absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then number 15, negative absolute value of 5 over absolute value of negative 5. Absolute value of 5 is 5, but the negative on the outside makes this negative. The absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5. Negative 5 divided by positive 5, negative divided by positive gives us a negative answer, and the answer is 1. On this sheet, it brings up something that's a little bit different. We've been talking about absolute value. And absolute value being length or distance from 0. How far away something is from 0 on the number line. But that's completely different from opposites. Okay? Completely different from opposites. If we take the word down, the opposite is up. If we take the word left, the opposite is right. In numbers, opposite deals with the sign of the number. So if I have positive 4, the opposite is negative 4. If I have negative 2/3, the opposite is positive 2/3. So 2 different concepts, absolute value being length, and it is always positive. But opposites meaning one is positive, the other is negative. Those are opposites of each other. So on this sheet up at the top, it asks what is the opposite of 7? Well, if I have positive 7, the opposite of that is negative 7. If I want to know the opposite of 13, if I have positive 13, the opposite is negative 13. Opposite of 4.5. It doesn't matter if we have fractions or decimals, the concept still applies. What is the opposite of 4.5? Okay, good. Negative 4.5. If we are asking for the opposite of negative 4, the opposite of negative 4 is Opposite of -4. Okay, correct. 4. The middle part of this sheet is just going back and asking absolute value. So absolute value of 8 is 8. Absolute value of -3 is 3. Absolute value of 9 is 9. Absolute value of -6 is 6. Okay, but I want us to see these problems at the bottom, because on the bottom they're asking something a little bit different. On the first one, they want to know which is the greatest. That say encircle the greater number. So on the first one, we have absolute value of 9 and the opposite of 6. Well, the absolute value of 9 is 9. The opposite of 6 is -6. So 9 is the bigger. Okay. That was in that first block. The second block is opposite of 8 and absolute value of -11. Well, the opposite of 8 is -8. The absolute value of -11 is +11. So +11 is bigger. Okay, let's look at the one off to the side here that says absolute value of 3 and opposite of -5. Well, the absolute value of 3 is 3, but the opposite of -5 is +5. So +5 would be bigger. How about opposite of -4 and opposite of -6? Which one of those is the largest? Okay. The opposite of -4 would be +4. The opposite of -6 would be +6. So yes, this one is the largest. So it's sort of combining in the same problem the two concepts of absolute value and opposite, making you see that there is a difference between absolute value and opposites. They mean two different things, but people get them confused with each other. Okay?
If you liked this video, please click on the thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, please click on the subscribe button. And if you want to be notified when new videos are posted, please click the bell.